Very good morning. Welcome to Breakfast with John Kay and Louise Minchin.
Hello, good morning. Tuesday, the 22nd of December, and our top story is that the government's chief scientific advisor has warned that tougher restrictions are likely to be needed in more areas of England.
To shield once again, and this kind of light, very distant at the end of the tunnel, you know. We're looking at April, maybe, for some more positive news. At least the League Cup final is, anyway.
One thing in the diary, yeah?
I mean,
I'm putting things in the diary, but who knows? Kat, thank you so much. Thank you. So retailers are playing down fears of food shortages after France shut its borders to UK hauliers for 48 hours due to the UK's new coronavirus variant. Yeah, they're playing down those warnings, but they have said as well that there could be serious disruption if there are longer delays. If this... In other news today, clinically extremely vulnerable people living in Tier 4 areas in England are being told not to go to work, even if they're unable to do their job from home. Yeah, it means they now face even more time behind closed doors. Welcome to Breakfast with John Kay and Louise Minchin. Good morning. Well, as for those issues at Dover, the French government says it will announce measures a bit later today that should allow transport links with Britain to resume and for trade to start flowing again across the Channel. France closed its borders after growing concern about the new coronavirus strain.
A new variant of the virus inside the UK. And again, from Boris Johnson's point of view, he's also not yet concluded a trade deal with the European Union, and it must concentrate minds to look at the kind of disruption we're seeing already for other reasons around Dover.
And do it pretty quickly is getting that testing facilities down to Kent to help reopen the border. We've had 24 hours or so now of this chaos in Kent, both in Dover and at the Eurotunnel.
We can now speak live on Breakfast to the Home Secretary, Priti Patel. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Hi. Are we any closer to a deal now to get things moving again?
Well, we heard from the Prime Minister and the Transport Secretary yesterday evening. There are discussions underway. And of course, it's in both our interests, both from the United Kingdom and from the French authorities as well, to find a resolution to this. And those conversations are taking place.
How close are we getting to a resolution? We've heard stories on Breakfast this morning about lorry drivers who've just got a cereal bar to survive on, no toilet facilities, shoppers who are worried about enough goods on the shelves. I mean, when will we get some clarity?
Well, first of all, you'll hear later on today in terms of developments and updates. Those conversations are taking place with my colleague, the Transport Secretary, and his counterpart. But I think it's also important just to say a few other things. Very much you've touched on the welfare of the lorry drivers. You know, we have now opened up and we have our Operation Brock, where basically we divert and have a contraflow process now for lorries to go to one of our inland sites, which is at Manston, where we do have welfare facilities and support for those hauliers. And that is all part of the plans, our normal operational plans that have now been activated. So, you know, there are a range of contingency measures that are associated, you know, when ports are closed, when there are issues at the border between the short straits. And that's part of our normal operating model.
But if a lorry driver's only been given a cereal bar overnight, the plan doesn't seem to be great.
Well, actually, these are normal operating procedures that we have. We have two processes. One is Operation Stack, which took place yesterday. And yes, you and your viewers have seen the queues of the lorry along the M20. In fact, those queues, some of those queues have been taking place anyway over successive weeks, recent weeks. But that happens any time. That happens all the time. But Operation Brock basically means that we now divert lorries to an inland site, which is in Manston, and support services are there. They're absolutely up and running, and that is part of our operational posture. That's part of the planning that we have, and that's just part of our, you know, contingency work that we do when it comes to road haulage issues at the border.
You mentioned the number of lorries. Can we clear this up? Because I think people might be a bit surprised this morning. Your colleague Grant Shapps, the Transport Secretary, said in Downing Street last night there were about 170 lorries stuck on the M20. We then discover overnight it's close to 1,000. Why that discrepancy? Why the difference?
Well, I think, first of all, the number of lorries consistently, well, they continue to fluctuate. So, for example, I mean, the numbers will be different from, when Grant spoke at the press conference yesterday to this morning, because you'll find that many of the hauliers, they would have dropped off, their goods wherever they were travelling around the country and then come back. So the numbers do fluctuate. And I think Highways England have actually confirmed overnight that the numbers are now around approximately, and this changes, around 900. But of course, you've got to bear in mind that lorries are moving constantly. You've got more come in. We've got some going to Manston, well, most going now to Manston because of the operational block and the contraflow processes that are in place. But those numbers change all the time.
And those are the official counted numbers. We've heard from our correspondent there this morning that there are also hundreds more just parked up wherever they can on roadsides or curbsides, just waiting to be able to get moving. It's a pretty grim situation, isn't it? We know that the French are talking about trying to get some sort of testing regime in place so that drivers could be tested, get a negative result and then head across the channel. How close are you? How quickly could you get that in place? I mean, could that be operational by the end of today?
Well, of course, we're doing mass testing around the country, as many of your viewers will know and may have seen in their own local communities. So that is correct. Testing of some sort is as part of the discussions that the Transport Secretary is having with his counterpart in France right now. Getting those tests up and running, can happen relatively quickly. But in terms of the details of that is something that both the Transport Secretary and his counterpart will be discussing right now. So I don't want to speculate in terms of, the nature of the testing and how soon that could be up and running.
But you don't want to speculate, but it's absolutely crucial by the sounds of it, because that's the only thing that's going to apparently reassure the French, isn't it, and get things moving and get those guys who are in their lorries freed. I mean, given the experience you talk about, given what you say is the success of testing in the UK already, surely we should be in a position to get that operational, get that infrastructure into Dover in the next few hours by the end of today.
Well, of course we can, and we have plenty of experience across government. You've seen this around the country. And I should also say that, these discussions are ongoing right now, so I don't think it's right to speculate about timings or when, and the Transport Secretary will speak later today, no doubt, in terms of updates and progress. Testing is part of our new normal, and I would argue that it's not just the only thing that the French authorities are looking for. The fact of the matter is, we've always worked, I think, quite constructively throughout this crisis, throughout the coronavirus crisis, to keep goods travelling and to keep flow at the border. And we've worked actually in a very mutually beneficial way to do that throughout this year. So yes, we do now have this second strain of coronavirus. Let's be clear as well, it's not just confined to the United Kingdom. This second strain is elsewhere in the world and could well be in Europe as well. I think other countries are already indicating that they may have this strain. So it's in all our interest to do everything that we possibly can to keep each other safe and use the methodology, whether it's testing, whether it's a vaccine as well. Of course, we've had 500,000 people vaccinated in this country, to continue to grow that base and use the tools that we have at our disposal.
Some people were saying months and months ago that we should be testing at our airports and our ports regularly, and that never really happened. If it had happened, we'd have been better prepared for a moment like this, wouldn't we?
Well, actually, no. First of all, as you've already heard me say, we speak to all our counterparts around the world when it comes to keeping goods flowing at the border. This has been a constant discussion throughout the year. And if you think back to March, there were many other countries closing their borders. We were very clear that we would keep goods flowing. And the fact of the matter is, we're speaking about hauliers, lorry drivers who are self-contained in their own vehicles. They don't actually get out of their vehicles. Many of them have all their facilities within their lorries. But, you've also mentioned airport testing. Well, the government has been working with airlines and also airports. And of course, airports are not run by the government. We've been having those discussions, and you'll know from the Transport Secretary through his work throughout the year, he and his team have been in those discussions. And, we now know that many airlines actually ask passengers to have a test. Doesn't mean you have to be physically tested at the airport, that you have a test before you travel. But of course, right now, the guidance is not to travel, because that is clearly one way in which this virus spreads.
Scientific advisor Patrick Vallance said yesterday that this new variant is everywhere, and he says it's very likely that there are going to have to be more restrictions in more places across England. People waking up this morning will hear that and they'll think, we're heading for another lockdown, aren't we?
Well, I think it's important to remember that as we see this virus, spread, grow and evolve, the government will take, working with our scientific advisors and others, all the necessary steps basically to try to contain this, and obviously to remind people not to meet, to not engage with other people, and to protect themselves. So we have review mechanisms, review measures, review points every 2 weeks now. So we look at the data across government, and obviously decisions are then made accordingly, and you've seen the decisions that have been undertaken over the weekend.
But having seen that detail and hearing about this new variant, the governments in Northern Ireland and Scotland and Wales have said, OK, right, we're going to go for tougher restrictions immediately. They've already announced that. So many people think that the government looking after England is behind the curve. Some might say again, and that sooner or later you will have to say, yes, we're going to have another lockdown, inevitable.
Well, actually, first of all, the government is not behind the curve. The government has been very clear from day one in terms of the protective measures that we have been undertaking and put in place. You've seen regulations, you've seen changes to the law, week after week, basically, to protect the British public. And alongside that, measures, basically, whether it's police enforcement, but also a reminder to the public in terms of what they themselves need to do, and they have been doing brilliantly to keep each other safe. So we have introduced a Tier 4 over the weekend. Now, at the weekend, many people and commentators were also saying they felt that was a step too far. It was the right thing to do. I know it's a run up to Christmas, but it's the right thing to do in order to keep people safe. And all measures are constantly and rightly so under review. And as I've said, the government will continue to work with the scientific and medical advisors to ensure that we have the right measures in place to keep the British public safe.
If you're in Tier 4 now, you shouldn't leave Tier 4, but some people did leave in those hours before the new rules kicked in and in the day or two beforehand. Some councils, like Greater Manchester Council, have now said, look, these people you might have seen on Saturday, Sunday night, leaving stations, leaving London in great numbers, they should be self-isolating when they get to their destination for a week, 10 days, to keep the rest of the people safe at their destination. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think first of all, everyone should make their, the right decisions themselves, because quite frankly, individuals could be asymptomatic. They could actually be spreading this virus. So I think it's right that everybody, no matter where they are in the country, I would urge people, not to travel, first of all, but I would also urge the public to undertake preventative and precautionary measures to reduce the number of contacts that you have with people, and to, stay at home. Our advice is to stay at home. Our advice is certainly not to go out and about and spread the virus. We are encouraging everyone to stay at home this Christmas, which is why, we put in and announced over the weekend the measures around Christmas Day, but actually the restriction of contact. So it's right that people stay at home. And if people want to call that self-isolation, so be it. But I would continue to urge people to stay at home and reduce the number of contacts they have with one another.
So if somebody left London, say, before the announcement, but might be carrying, albeit asymptomatically, this new variant or any variant of COVID from London, say, Saturday afternoon, and got to family in Greater Manchester, you would say, yes, you should be self-isolating for, say, 10 days.
Everyone should be staying at home. The message is very clear. The message is to stay at home and do not, increase your contact with other people. And this isn't a new message. We do have this new strain of coronavirus, but coronavirus spreads through human contact. So staying at home is absolutely vital right now. And I think it's fair to say, I've seen this, I think I've been on your programme before and I've said this, the British public are really following the rules. I've seen this throughout the year. They've been incredible at following the advice and guidance because they're conscientious people and they want to keep each other safe.
Why didn't the government...
I think that's absolutely vital.
I mean, because it was quite likely that when the Tier 4 thing was announced at the weekend that people might decide to leave immediately and try to get ahead of it. Why didn't the government then say, if you are leaving, when you get there, you should self-isolate? It's a bit late now, isn't it? Some people have got to their new destinations and they've been mixing in that new community and they've been shopping and meeting family.
Well, people haven't necessarily been mixing because the message has been consistent, actually. It's been stay at home. And throughout the weekend, Tier 4 measures have been very clear that this is not about mixing with other people and going out. People need to stay at home. The universal message associated with coronavirus is to, reduce your contact with people. And that is wherever you are, and also ensure that you follow the very sensible measures around social distancing, wearing face coverings, washing hands, these are preventative measures. And I think, quite frankly, we've been living with this virus for long enough right now. People are very sensible and they understand what kind of protective measures they need, not just to keep themselves safe, but also to keep other people safe. Our message is clear: stay at home, but also keep other people safe as well. And we do that by following the guidance, washing our hands, keeping our distance through social distancing, but actually thinking about others. And that's a difficult message right now at this time of year, where people want to naturally be with their nearest and dearest and their loved ones at Christmas. And there are families across the country, quite frankly, who are unable to do that.
Home Secretary,
and I think we should all just remember right now that these are important measures to make sure that we keep each other safe.
Home Secretary, before you go, can I just talk to you about a tweet that you posted back in October, which was during the trial, which finally came to an end yesterday, the migrant trial, where you talked about ruthless criminals. There's the tweet there on the screen. That, I think you later deleted that. You did later delete that because it was thought to have potentially endangered that trial. Do you accept that was a mistake? I suppose by deleting it, you're accepting that was a mistake.
Well, we were asked to remove that tweet, so we did the right thing and absolutely removed that tweet. But I think it's worth pointing out as well to your viewers that tweet was put out after certain individuals had actually gone into a guilty plea.
But certain individuals were still facing trial, weren't they? Your tweet could, according to the legal experts, the judge, could have endangered that trial.
We were asked to remove it, and I did remove that tweet. I think that's the most important point here. But that tweet was issued at the time when people had entered a guilty plea around the atrocious, absolutely appalling deaths of the 39 Vietnamese migrants who were killed in that lorry in Purfleet.
You say we were asked to remove it. Do I take it from that maybe it wasn't you that wrote it?
I was asked via the Home Office to remove that. So
was it you that wrote the tweet yourself personally?
I didn't personally write it, no, but I issued the tweet.
Sorry, I'm slightly confused. You said what should be said on your behalf, or you?
So some of my tweets are written for me, and so in that instance, that was drafted for me at the time when the guilty pleas were made, and that was obviously issued by me, and then of course it was removed afterwards. I was asked to remove it.
Did you give the wording to be tweeted?
No, I did not.
Okay. And when you saw it, did you tell them to withdraw it? Did you realise that that shouldn't have happened?
Of course. So it was drawn to my attention at the time that obviously the case was ongoing, and therefore we should, that tweet should be removed, and that's exactly what happened. Did you realise
it? Was that only when the judge had said so, though, or was that after you saw it yourself?
Well, I can't remember at the time. I think we'd been formally asked to remove it, and that's effectively what happened.
OK, Priti Patel, Home Secretary, thanks for joining us here on Breakfast this morning.
Thank you.
You are watching Breakfast. Kat is going to talk about some sport, other things as well in the Sport Bulletin, isn't there? Morning.
Yes, morning. Oh, there he is. Kevin Sinfield. He's back. He's a man who makes the headlines, isn't he? Kevin Sinfield, running those incredible 7 marathons in 7 days to raise money for Rob Burrow and for the Motor Neurone Disease Association. And he's had his say as well about brain injuries in rugby league. We've heard a lot.
Hello, this is BBC News with the latest headlines for viewers in the UK and around the world. Efforts to clear a backlog of thousands of trucks from southeast England after France lifts a ban on entry from Britain. Hello and a very warm welcome to the programme. There are efforts now to clear a backlog of thousands of trucks in and around the English port of Dover. This is after France lifted a 48-hour ban on entry from Britain. Hauliers will be allowed to cross on the condition they test negative for COVID-19. Truck drivers who've been stranded since France imposed the restrictions on Sunday after the British government warned of a new, fast-spreading variant of the virus. And we'll have a lot more on that in our business programme in about 20 minutes. I'll be joined by an organisation involved in Europe's supply of fresh food, the food chain behind it, and the European Road Hauliers Association.